Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Monday, the 19th of August. I'm Stephen Ridgway. There is new malware aimed at Windows users via weaponized games. Um, the malware has been dubbed Beaver Tail and apparently comes from a North Korean cyber espionage group that that it is primarily focused on job seekers, and it is, although primarily aimed at Windows, has actually now been seen to morph into a Mac OS version as well. So quite a lot going on there. Um, Usual stuff, doesn't do anything particularly, out of the ordinary, distributed in the usual sorts of ways, effectively trying to get people to download malicious pieces of software or games or whatever it may be, unknowingly. The reason that I brought this to your attention is it is targeting people in various parts of the world, including, I think, Europe. So watch out for it. And secondly, the article has got some IOCs, so definitely worth making sure that your SIEM platform or your security visibility tooling has got the ability to detect this particular piece of malware, and if not, you can write yourself some custom alerts based around a couple of IP addresses and some hashes, presumably of different bits of the malware. There is an ongoing there is ongoing disruption following a cyber attack. Actually, probably a couple of weeks ago, so I'm slightly late to the party with this one. That is disrupting housing services across Greater Manchester, which in this case we're talking about Manchester, Salford, and Bolton councils. The attack was against Locata, which is a company responsible for providing housing software for several councils. The breach was acknowledged on the 29th of July. Just about 20 odd days ago. It has impacted services, continues to impact services, housing services in those three councils. I would say if you live in any of those areas and make use of housing services, just be aware that this attack has happened. You may well have seen the impact. The websites have taken down. Various services were disrupted during this, they are recovering from this. Also, though, bear in mind that at the moment an unknown amount of data may have been exfiltrated, so watch out for phishing attacks based on information which may have leaked as part of these attacks. Also say, though, I mean, if you're going to pick anywhere in the UK to launch a cyber attack, Manchester's probably not the smartest place, considering Manchester and London are two huge cybersecurity hubs for the UK. So one hopes that Manchester, Salford, and Bolton councils are making use of local talent in order to recover from this and deal with the aftermath of the issues. So there's an article I came across in Security Affairs this morning that talks about how OpenAI has dismantled an Iranian influence operation that's targeting the US presidential elections. Why, you may ask, have I highlighted this today? Well, a handful of reasons. Firstly, there are some indicators of compromise, which are worth being aware of, and making sure that you've got visibility. So there are 5 domains which have been associated with this particular piece of disinformation. Even if you haven't been thinking about this up till this point, it may well be worth going back through your security visibility logs to see whether any of your systems have been seen to be making connections or making DNS requests for any of these 5 domains, because it may indicate that people have been targeted for disinformation. The second point is just be aware. These disinformation campaigns are much more widespread than people realise. This particular operation was known as Storm 2035, and this one was generating content about US presidential elections. However, there have been recent disinformation campaigns focused around the Gaza conflict, Israel, especially during the Olympics, Venezuela, which, as those of us that know a little about or have contacts with Venezuela understand that the recent Venezuelan elections are, shall we say, highly contested. Scottish independence has come under this. It's so there's a lot of this stuff going on, and it is definitely worth reiterating that you need to be careful about where you get your information from, and you should be encouraging I think your friends and family to be cautious about formulating opinions based on information that they get from particular sources. The other one, though, that's interesting is this case, ChatGPT has taken down a certain amount of information, but that, reading between the lines, it may be that so one part of the way that this has been taken down is that OpenAI has blocked a cluster of ChatGPT accounts that were being used to create AI-generated articles and social media posts with disinformation. There is a possibility then that OpenAI are looking at what you're doing inside your accounts. Either that, or they're watermarking stuff so that they can spot it once it's been published. Don't know. I think more likely the former of the two. So I think that's just, again, a timely reminder that stuff that you do in these chat, artificial intelligence chat solutions, not just OpenAI's ChatGPT, but all of the other ones as well, names of which I can't remember too many now to care. But all of them, you've got to be very careful about what data you're giving it, because you are A, probably not as anonymous as you think you are, and B, the information that you're giving it is almost definitely not as confidential as once you've given it to them, is not as confidential as you would have expected it to be. So, handful of things to think about there. And then finally from me, AI is now capable of generating fake fingerprints that work effectively as master keys for smartphones that use biometric sensors. So, yes, I know that fingerprint sensors are a little bit old hat, but there is this really misplaced assumption that biometrics is the solution to identification Yes, and last time I talked about this, we got into a little bit of an interesting discussion around what's the difference between identification and authentication. Well, yes, all right, yes, a little academic though when the two are so tightly linked. So, certainly for gaining access to technology, I'm a biometric skeptic in that sense. I don't think that. I think that your biometrics accurately identify you, but only in the situations where the biometric data is read directly from you. Okay, by which I mean, yes, it will work for your fingerprint on a fingerprint reader that knows your fingerprint should recognize you as being you. Does that mean that somebody else may be misidentified, like a false positive as being you? Well, yeah, I think that is entirely possible. Part of the reason for this is that whilst fingerprints are unique, the fingerprints, at least the likelihood of a clash or convergence of two different fingerprints with the same, or two different people with the same pattern is very, very low. And the statistics of that's been known for a very long time in law enforcement. It comes out of law enforcement. You have to measure quite a lot of data points, and it is not black and white. It is probabilistic, and the more data you give it, the more likely you are to be making the right decision. Okay, I mean, think of it. By the way, think of it like this: if you've got a fingerprint with a whorl on it, which are things that look like sort of concentric circles, I think, anyway, if I remember rightly, if you're measuring one data point and that's it, a sense of a whorl, there is a very high likelihood of false positives. Lots of people's fingers have got whorls, not all of them, but quite a lot do. But you're saying, well, a whorl and this and that, and then when you start to take into account the position on the finger as well, it can be very accurate. Fingerprint readers on most computers, though, are not, I don't believe, are that accurate. I think they allow for a certain amount of fuzzing. The reason being, things like the state of your finger can affect the way that it reads. If you cut your finger recently, that will then look different to a computer. If you put your finger down at a slightly different angle each time, that will give you a slightly different reading. So there's a certain amount of tolerance for error that's built into these things. That then, I believe, leads to the ability for attackers to create what are kind of deep fake fingerprints that don't necessarily have to be taken directly from your fingerprint. So depending on how the fingerprint reader is converting the data into digital data, and depending on the amount of error tolerance that's built into the software that is doing the identification bit, you can end up with master fingerprints that are able to fool sensors 76% of the time. Well, that's very interesting. So I would say, if you're interested in this whole concept of is biometrics a good way to identify users of technology devices, my personal opinion is no. And we've also seen there are other failings in the implementation of some of these things. So, for example, on some devices, although I think fixed now, historically there hasn't necessarily been any security between the biometric reader and the authentication, as in the rest of the motherboard. The bit of so not the identification bit, but the authentication bit, is such that you could simply inject in something that says, yes, I have identified this person as Stephen Ridgway, and the OS goes, oh yeah, all right then, without actually confirming that was true piece of information. So, there are all sorts of hardware areas. It's a very thorny area. Anyway, it's an interesting article. Master fingerprints to unlock smartphones. I bet you it's been known in law enforcement for a lot longer than they are willing to let on. It is worth thinking about if you're using biometrics. Yes, it is extremely convenient, but bear in mind that when you're using convenience like this, you need to be well aware of the potential impacts that it would have if this stuff were compromised, because short of some of the hardware key solutions, most things can be broken one way or another. I just think that it's, as I said before, it's much harder to change your DNA or change your fingerprint or your your eye retina blood vessel patterns or whatever it may be. It's very much harder to change those than it is to change a password. Right, that is enough from me for today. Hope you have a good start to the day, and I will